There are moments in life when we sense a shift, a stirring deep within our souls, a divine transition taking place. We may not always understand it, and sometimes it feels as though everything is falling apart, but I want to tell you today, what looks like chaos is often preparation. God never gives a blessing without first preparing the vessel to carry it. Before God elevates, he refines. Before he promotes, he prunes. And before he blesses, he prepares. There are clear signs that indicate when God is getting ready to do something extraordinary in your life. Some of these signs may not look like blessings at first, but they are necessary steps toward your breakthrough. Let's dive into these signs so you can recognize what God is doing in your life. The first and most common sign that God is preparing you for something great is an increase in trials. Difficulties and setbacks are not indicators of God's absence, but proof that he is refining you for the next level. Consider the life of Joseph. He was given a dream of leadership and greatness, yet before he could step into his destiny, he endured betrayal, slavery, false accusations, and imprisonment. Every trial Joseph faced was not meant to destroy him, but to prepare him for the throne of Egypt. Many people pray for promotion but resist the process that comes with it. God does not hand out major blessings without first testing your character. When gold is purified, it goes through fire. When diamonds are formed, they undergo extreme pressure. Your trials are not punishment, they are preparation. If you feel like the battle has intensified, it is because your blessing is near. Stand firm, for the pressure is proof that something great is on the way. Sometimes God will allow major disruptions to take place in your life, not to harm you, but to shift you into his perfect plan. Elijah sat by the brook Cherith, where God provided water and ravens brought him food. It was a place of comfort and provision. Yet one day the brook dried up. God was not punishing Elijah, he was repositioning him for a greater assignment. When doors close, relationships end, or opportunities seem to slip through your fingers, it may be God's way of redirecting you. Many times we hold on to things that are no longer part of our destiny. We get attached to seasons that have expired. But when God wants to move you, he will shake things up. Think about how an eagle teaches its young to fly. The mother eagle begins to make the nest uncomfortable, removing the soft layers so that the eaglet has no choice but to leave. This discomfort forces the eaglet to spread its wings and soar. If you feel like everything familiar is being removed, do not despair. It is a sign that God is making room for something greater. Trust the process, even when it doesn't make sense. Before God elevates you, he will often stir a deep dissatisfaction within you. This is not a sign of ungratefulness, but an indication that he is calling you higher. David was anointed as king while still a shepherd. Imagine how he felt, knowing he was called to the throne, yet still tending sheep. That restlessness was a sign that his current position was too small for his future. If you feel like there is more inside of you, if you wake up with a desire to do greater things, that is God stirring you. He is expanding your capacity for the blessing that is coming. One of the most powerful signs of preparation is a deep hunger for God. When God is about to move in your life, he will first call you into deeper intimacy with him. Moses spent time on the mountain before leading Israel. Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness before stepping into his ministry. Before major blessings come, there is always a season of spiritual awakening. If you find yourself praying more, worshiping more, and longing for God's presence like never before, do not ignore it. God is drawing you closer because what he is about to do in your life requires a greater level of faith and dependence on him. When God is preparing you for a major blessing, he will align you with the right people and open doors that no man can shut. Ruth was a widow struggling to survive, but God positioned her in the right place at the right time to meet Boaz. That divine connection changed her destiny forever. Pay attention to the people God places in your life. Sometimes he will send a mentor, a friend, or an unexpected helper to guide you to your next level. Every person God used mightily had to go through a waiting season. Abraham waited 25 years for the promise. Joseph waited in prison. David waited to become king. Waiting is not wasted time. It is preparation time. In the waiting, God is building your patience, refining your character, and teaching you to trust him. If you feel stuck, remember that God's timing is perfect. Stay faithful in the waiting because what he promised will come to pass. A major sign that your blessing is near is when you face increased opposition. Before David became king, Saul tried to kill him. Before Jesus stepped into his calling, he was tempted in the wilderness. If the enemy is fighting you hard, it is because he sees what God is about to do in your life. Do not be discouraged by the battle. It is confirmation that you are on the right path. Before God blesses you, he will clarify your purpose. You will begin to see new visions, dreams, and ideas. He will give you insight into what he created you to do. When this happens, write it down, pray over it, and prepare yourself. The blessing is closer than you think. If you recognize these signs in your life, rejoice. Do not fear the trials, disruptions, or waiting. These are all indicators that God is setting you up for something great. Your breakthrough is near. Your blessing is coming. Stay faithful and watch what God will do. One of the clearest signs that God is preparing you for a major blessing is that life suddenly becomes more difficult. Instead of ease, you face unexpected challenges, obstacles, and setbacks. It may feel like everything that could go wrong is going wrong, but trials are not always signs of punishment. They are often indicators of preparation. Joseph's story is a perfect example. He had a vision of greatness, dreams that God gave him about ruling and leading. But instead of walking straight into his destiny, he was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. Every hardship he endured was part of the divine process that shaped him into the leader he was meant to be. When God is getting ready to bless you, he will refine your character first. Difficulties do not break you, they build you. They test your faith, strengthen your resilience, and prepare your heart for the weight of the blessing that is coming. A person who has never faced hardship will not know how to handle success. God allows these seasons of struggle so that when the blessing arrives, you have the wisdom, patience, and maturity to sustain it. Trials also serve to reveal what is inside of you. Pressure exposes weaknesses, attitudes, and hidden fears that could later sabotage your blessing. It is easy to trust God when everything is going well, but true faith is tested in the fire of adversity. Job, a man described as righteous, lost everything: his wealth, his children, and even his health. Yet, in the midst of suffering, he did not curse God. His faith remained steadfast. In the end, he received a double portion of what was lost. Some challenges come to teach dependence on God. When resources dry up, when relationships fail, when every door seems to close, it forces a deeper reliance on God's provision. This is why many people experience their greatest spiritual growth during the hardest seasons of their lives. They learn that God alone is their source. A common misconception is that struggle means God is distant. The opposite is often true. When gold is refined, it must go through fire. When a seed is planted, it must be buried in darkness before it grows. When an athlete trains, their muscles must be stretched and torn before they become stronger. Growth is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Some of the most successful and impactful people went through great hardship before stepping into their purpose. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison before leading a nation. Oprah Winfrey faced rejection and failure before becoming a global icon. Before Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, he failed thousands of times. The greater the assignment, the greater the preparation. If you are going through a season where everything seems to be going wrong, do not despair. It could be a sign that God is strengthening you for the very thing you have been praying for. Another key indicator that God is preparing you for something greater is sudden and unexpected disruptions. Sometimes life seems to be going smoothly when, without warning, everything changes. A stable job is lost, a long-term relationship ends, a door that seems certain suddenly closes. These moments are painful, but they are often necessary shifts that move you toward your destiny. Elijah was by the brook Cherith, where God miraculously provided for him through ravens bringing food. He was comfortable and secure. Then the brook dried up. That place of provision was no longer sustainable, not because God abandoned him, but because God was leading him somewhere else. If the brook had not dried up, Elijah might have stayed in a place that was only meant to be temporary. Many people stay in comfort zones far too long. They hold on to jobs, relationships, and seasons that have already expired. When God wants to elevate someone, he often disrupts their comfort. The discomfort forces movement. When Israel was in Egypt, they were content, even in slavery, until Pharaoh made their conditions unbearable. The hardship prepared them to leave and step into the promised land. When disruptions happen, the natural reaction is to question why. But in hindsight, many people realize that what seemed like a setback was actually a setup. A job loss led to a better career. A broken relationship made space for the right person. A failed plan cleared the way for something greater. A powerful example of divine disruption is the story of the Apostle Paul. He was on his way to Damascus, believing he was fulfilling his purpose, persecuting Christians. Then he was struck by a light from heaven, knocked to the ground and blinded. That single moment completely changed the course of his life. What seemed like a devastating interruption became the turning point that led him to his true calling. Sometimes disruptions come as opportunities disguised as obstacles. There are people who have lost jobs only to start businesses that made them more successful than they ever imagined. There are those who faced rejection only to be redirected to a path that was far greater than what they initially wanted. What feels like rejection is often redirection. Divine disruptions also test obedience. When God told Abraham to leave his homeland and go to an unknown land, it was a major disruption to his life. He had to leave everything familiar, but because he obeyed, he became the father of many nations. When God shakes things up, it is not to harm, but to reposition. A mother eagle, when teaching her young to fly, makes the nest uncomfortable. She removes the soft padding so the eaglet no longer feels at ease. Eventually, she pushes the eaglet out of the nest. It may seem cruel, but it is the only way the eagle will learn to fly. Without discomfort, there is no growth. Disruptions can also serve to protect. Sometimes what we see as a disappointment is actually divine protection. A relationship that ended may have saved you from heartache down the road. A business deal that failed may have prevented financial ruin. God sees the full picture. When he removes something, it is always for a greater purpose. If doors are closing and disruptions are happening, do not be discouraged. These shifts are signs that something better is on the way. God never takes without giving greater in return. He never closes a door without opening a better one. When disruptions come, instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what is God preparing me for? The answer will lead you to your next season of blessing. Before God blesses you with something new, he often allows you to experience a deep sense of restlessness. It is an internal stirring that makes you feel unsettled with where you are. This is not the same as being ungrateful. Rather, it is a sign that you have outgrown your current season. David was anointed as king while he was still a shepherd. Imagine carrying the weight of a royal calling while tending to sheep. He knew there was more inside of him, yet he had to wait for the right time. That tension, the knowledge of greater things ahead while being stuck in an ordinary place, creates a kind of holy dissatisfaction. This feeling is not meant to frustrate, but to prepare. Many people experience this restlessness in their careers, relationships, or personal growth. They wake up with a desire for more, sensing that they are meant for something greater. This is often God's way of telling them that change is coming. A butterfly inside a cocoon reaches a point where it can no longer stay confined. It must break free or it will never. A person who is about to transition into a new level often finds that the things they once enjoyed no longer satisfy them. Conversations that once engaged them now seem empty. Activities that used to bring excitement feel routine. This internal shift is not random. It is God enlarging their capacity for what is ahead. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace with every luxury at his disposal. Yet, there came a moment when he could no longer ignore the suffering of his people. Something inside of him rejected comfort and demanded change. This restlessness led him to his true purpose as Israel's deliverer. This sign is also evident in the way people begin to feel misaligned with their surroundings. Friends they once connected with no longer inspire them. Environments that once felt comfortable now seem restrictive. The reason is simple. Growth requires separation. When a plant outgrows its pot, It must be replanted into a larger space or it will become stunted. Amen. This restlessness can also manifest as an urgency to prepare. Many feel the need to develop new skills, read more, pray more, or position themselves differently. They may not understand why, but they feel driven to be ready. God never moves a person into a new season without first placing a sense of expectation in their spirit. Ignoring this restlessness often leads to prolonged discomfort. When a person refuses to move when God is calling them higher, they will feel increasing pressure until they step out in faith. The longer they resist, the more uncomfortable their current situation becomes. A caterpillar has no idea what it will become, yet at the appointed time it stops eating, attaches itself to a branch, and prepares for transformation. It does not resist the process because it is instinctively aware that change is necessary. Likewise, when God begins to stir a person's spirit, they must be willing to embrace the transition. Before God releases a major blessing, he often calls a person into deeper intimacy with him. This increased desire for prayer, worship, and studying his word is a clear sign that something is shifting. Moses had to spend time on the mountain before leading Israel. Jesus withdrew to the wilderness before stepping into his public ministry. The pattern is clear. Before promotion, there is always a season of spiritual preparation. Many people find themselves waking up earlier to pray or feeling a strong urge to fast. They may feel unsatisfied with surface-level faith and desire a deeper connection with God. This is not a coincidence. It is God drawing them closer so they will be spiritually ready for what is ahead. A person who is about to step into a significant blessing must be rooted in God's presence. Without a strong foundation, the blessing can become a burden. Many people pray for success but lack the spiritual discipline to handle it. Increased intimacy with God ensures that when the blessing comes, their heart remains aligned with his will. This hunger for God often comes with a refining process. As a person grows closer to him, they become more aware of things that need to change. Old habits, negative mindsets, and distractions are exposed. This purification is necessary because new levels require new discipline. A good example of this is found in the life of Esther. Before she became queen, she underwent a season of preparation. She did not step into her role immediately. She was trained, purified, and made ready. Many times, God will separate a person from certain influences so they can hear him more clearly. This desire for God's presence also manifests in a shift of priorities. Things that once seemed important begin to lose their hold. Instead of chasing material success or approval from others, there is a longing for purpose and divine direction. The closer a person draws to God, the more they recognize that true fulfillment comes from him alone. Many testimonies of breakthrough begin with a season of seeking God. People often recall a time when they felt an unexplainable urge to spend more time in prayer. They did not know why, but they followed the prompting. Later, they realized that God was preparing them for a major transition. Spiritual hunger is a gift. It is an invitation to step into greater things. Those who respond to it are better positioned to receive what God has in store. Those who ignore it often find themselves feeling empty even after they receive what they once desired. Before a tree bears fruit, its roots grow deeper. Before a house is built higher, its foundation is strengthened. The deeper a person's relationship with God, the greater their capacity to handle blessings. Recognizing this sign is important. When God calls someone into a deeper relationship, they must respond. The time spent in prayer and worship during this season is never wasted. It is equipping them for what is to come. When God is preparing someone for a major blessing, he often introduces the right people at the right time. These divine connections are not by accident. They are strategic relationships meant to help fulfill his plan. Throughout the Bible, we see how God orchestrates divine connections to position people for their purpose. Ruth, a Moabite widow, had no idea that her loyalty to Naomi would lead her to meet Boaz. That one connection changed the trajectory of her life, placing her in the lineage of Jesus. Joseph, after years of hardship, was introduced to Pharaoh's cupbearer, a connection that ultimately brought him before the king and positioned him as the ruler of Egypt. Many people pray for blessings but do not recognize the people God sends as part of the answer. Divine connections are not always obvious at first. Sometimes they come in the form of mentors, unexpected friendships, or even people who challenge and stretch you. God places individuals in specific moments of life to open doors, provide guidance, and push toward purpose. These relationships are not based on personal effort, but on divine alignment. A person could spend years trying to force their way into certain circles, but when God is orchestrating connections, things happen effortlessly. One meeting, one conversation, or one introduction can accelerate a person's journey toward their destiny. Divine favor also accompanies these connections. When God's favor is on someone, opportunities that seemed impossible suddenly open. Esther experienced this when she was chosen to be queen. She had no political influence, no royal background, and no reason to be selected except for divine favor. She was positioned in the palace for a purpose, proving that God's favor can place people where their qualifications cannot. Favor is not just about personal success. It is about positioning for impact. When Nehemiah wanted to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, he needed resources. God gave him favor with the king, who granted everything he requested. Favor makes things happen that human effort alone cannot accomplish. Sometimes divine connections come in unexpected ways. A chance encounter, a delayed flight, or an unplanned conversation can lead to a breakthrough. Many successful people can trace their biggest opportunities to a single meeting that changed everything. Recognizing and nurturing these relationships is crucial. One challenge is that divine connections often require discernment. Not everyone who enters a person's life is meant to stay. Some are seasonal, meant for a particular assignment. Others may appear as helpers but are distractions. Knowing which connections to embrace and which to release is essential for moving forward. When God is preparing someone for a major blessing, he surrounds them with people who reflect their next level. A person believing for business success may suddenly find themselves among entrepreneurs. Someone called to ministry may notice they are being drawn to mentors who have walked that path. These shifts in relationships are not coincidences. They are divine placements. Being in the right place at the right time is often the result of divine favor. When someone walks in obedience, doors open without striving. A person seeking a job may get an unexpected call. An artist may receive an opportunity beyond what they imagined. These moments are not luck. They are orchestrated by God. Favor also brings protection. When Daniel was in Babylon, he found favor with the king. Even in a foreign land, God ensured that he had the right people advocating for him. Divine favor does not mean life will be without challenges, but it ensures that challenges do not stop destiny. Recognizing divine connections and favor requires humility and wisdom. Some people miss their blessings because they overlook the vessels God chooses to use. The right relationships often come disguised as ordinary encounters, but they carry extraordinary purpose. A major sign that God is preparing someone for a greater blessing is a prolonged season of waiting. This waiting period is not wasted time. It is a refining process designed to prepare the person for the next level. Abraham waited 25 years for Isaac, the son God promised him. Joseph waited over a decade between his dream and its fulfillment. David was anointed as king, but spent years running from Saul before he actually took the throne. These waiting seasons were not delays, they were preparation periods. Waiting reveals the heart. It exposes impatience, strengthens faith, and builds endurance. Many people pray for blessings, but are not yet ready to handle them. God, in his wisdom, does not withhold blessings. He prepares individuals to sustain them. During the waiting period, obedience is tested. The Israelites, after being freed from Egypt, wandered in the wilderness for 40 years because their hearts were not ready for the promised land. God had to teach them trust, discipline, and dependence on him before they could step into their inheritance. Some of the greatest lessons come in the waiting. A person who desires financial increase may go through a season of learning stewardship. Someone longing for marriage may go through a time of personal growth and healing. The waiting period is not punishment. It is God's way of ensuring that when the blessing arrives, it does not become a burden. This season often includes moments where nothing seems to be happening. Prayers feel unanswered, doors remain closed, and forward movement appears impossible. Yet behind the scenes, God is working. Bamboo trees spend years growing underground before they shoot up rapidly. What appears like delay is actually deep-rooted development. Testing is a key part of this season. Before Jesus began his ministry, he spent 40 days in the wilderness, fasting and resisting temptation. That period of testing strengthened him for what was ahead. A person who is about to step into a new level must be tested to ensure they can handle the weight of the blessing. God does not test to harm, he tests to refine. Gold is purified through fire, diamonds are formed under pressure. Muscles grow stronger through resistance. If a person is in a waiting season, they should not see it as a sign of abandonment, but as proof that they are being prepared. One of the hardest parts of waiting is trusting God's time. Sarah, in her impatience, tried to fulfill God's promise in her own way by giving Hagar to Abraham. That decision brought unnecessary complications. When people move ahead of God, they often create delays rather than acceleration. The waiting season is also a time of learning to hear God clearly. Distractions are removed, and dependence on his voice grows. Many testimonies of breakthrough come after a period of silence where God seemed distant, yet in reality he was working beneath the surface. Waiting is never easy, but it is necessary. Those who endure and remain faithful through this season are the ones who walk into lasting blessings. God does not operate on human timelines. His process is perfect, and when the right time comes, everything will align effortlessly. When God is preparing someone for a major shift, he often slows things down before accelerating them. Just as an arrow must be pulled backward before it is launched forward, the waiting season is the pullback before the breakthrough. When God is preparing someone for a major blessing, resistance often intensifies. It may seem as though everything is coming against them. Unexpected setbacks, discouragement, betrayal, or even attacks from places they never expected. This is not a coincidence. The enemy fights hardest when he sees someone on the verge of a breakthrough. Before Jesus began his ministry, he was led into the wilderness to be tempted by Satan. Right before David became king, Saul increased his efforts to kill him. Joseph was thrown into prison just before his promotion to the palace. These patterns are not random. They reveal that great opposition often precedes great elevation. Spiritual warfare manifests in different ways. Some experience increased fear, doubt, or confusion. Others find themselves battling exhaustion, frustration, or a sense of giving up. The enemy understands that if he can wear a person down before they reach their breakthrough, he can delay or discourage them from stepping into their destiny. One of the clearest signs of impending blessing is when attacks come from unexpected places. People who were once supportive may suddenly turn against them. Relationships may shift. Situations that seem stable may begin to fall apart. These disruptions are often allowed by God to test faith and remove anything that could become a hindrance in the next season. Job's story is a perfect example. He was a righteous man, yet he lost his wealth, his children, and his health in a short period. His friends doubted him, and his wife told him to curse God. What he did not realize was that this intense season of opposition was setting him up for double restoration. If Job had given up, he would have missed the greater blessing that was ahead. This kind of resistance also occurs when someone is walking in obedience. Many believe that following God means everything will become easy, but often the opposite happens. Jesus told his disciples, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world," John 16:33. Trouble is not a sign of being off track. It is often confirmation that one is exactly where they are meant to be. A person under attack must recognize that the battle is spiritual, not just physical. This is why prayer, fasting, and worship become critical in these seasons. When Daniel prayed for an answer, the angel told him that his response had been sent immediately, but there was resistance in the spiritual realm. The breakthrough was delayed but not denied. Opposition also exposes weaknesses that need to be strengthened before the blessing arrives. A person preparing for leadership may face attacks on their confidence, Someone stepping into financial abundance may be tested in stewardship. The resistance is not just about the enemy's attacks. It is about refining the person for what is ahead. Growth does not happen in comfort. Just as weight training builds strength through resistance, spiritual and emotional strength is developed through trials. A person who withstands pressure develops endurance, wisdom, and resilience. These qualities are necessary for sustaining blessings. A common mistake people make during this season is withdrawing or isolating themselves. The enemy thrives when people feel alone in their battles. But victory comes through staying connected to God, to prayer, and to those who uplift and strengthen faith. Recognizing that opposition is part of the process changes how one responds to it. Instead of despairing, they can rejoice, knowing that the attacks are proof that something great is on the way. A clear sign that God is preparing someone for a greater blessing is when doors begin to close unexpectedly. What once seemed like a secure opportunity may suddenly end. A relationship that appeared to be leading somewhere may unexpectedly fall apart. A job that felt stable may be lost without warning. These moments are painful, but they often serve as divine redirection. God closes doors not to punish, but to protect and position. If a door remains open that is not part of His plan, it can keep someone from stepping into the best He has prepared. Many people hold on to things that are only meant for a season. And when God is ready to move them forward, He must first remove what is no longer serving their purpose. Paul, one of the greatest apostles, experienced this firsthand. In Acts 16, he tried to enter certain regions to preach the gospel, but the Holy Spirit prevented him. These were not bad places, but they were not part of God's assignment for him at that time. Instead, God redirected him to Macedonia, where an even greater opportunity awaited. When doors close, the natural response is to feel rejected. Many people ask, why did this happen to me? But in hindsight, they often realize that what they thought was a loss was actually a setup for something better. A failed business may lead to a more successful venture. A relationship that ends may clear the way for the right person. A denied promotion may open the door to a far greater opportunity. A farmer does not mourn when pruning a tree. Pruning looks like loss because branches are cut away, but in reality, it is necessary for greater fruitfulness. Jesus said in John 15:02, every branch that bears fruit, He prunes so that it will bear even more. The cutting process is painful, but it leads to greater growth. Some doors close because they are distractions. A person may be pursuing something they believe is good, but God sees that it is not best. If they continue down that path, they may miss the fullness of what He has prepared. This is why discernment is important. What looks like an opportunity is not always God's best. Closed doors often force people out of comfort zones. Many people stay in jobs, relationships, and environments far longer than they should. If the door never closed, they might never step out in faith towards something greater. God uses endings to create new beginnings. Joseph experienced a series of closed doors before his promotion. He was thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, and later imprisoned. Each time it seemed like his life was moving backward instead of forward. But every closed door was leading him closer to his destiny. If he had not been in prison, he would not have met the cupbearer. If he had not met the cupbearer, he would not have been introduced to Pharaoh. What seemed like setbacks were actually divine setups. These moments require trust. It is easy to trust God when everything is going well, but true faith is built when nothing makes sense. A person must believe that if a door closes, it is because something greater is ahead. God does not remove without replacing. Some of the most successful people in history experience rejection before breakthrough. Walt Disney was fired for lacking creativity. Oprah Winfrey was told she was unfit for television. Thomas Edison failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb. What if they had given up? Their closed doors were simply redirections toward their destiny. Embracing closed doors requires shifting perspective. Instead of seeing them as losses, they should be seen as guidance. A person who understands that every no is leading to a better yes will not waste time mourning what was never meant for them. God's ways are higher than human understanding. What seems like an unanswered prayer is often answered in a way beyond what was expected. Every closed door is an invitation to trust Him more and to step into the greater blessings He has prepared. When God is preparing someone for a major blessing, He often stirs an inner restlessness that cannot be ignored. This is not an ordinary feeling of discomfort or impatience. It is a divine stirring, a sense that where they are is no longer enough. The job that once felt fulfilling suddenly feels restrictive. The environment that once seemed comfortable now feels limiting. The relationships that once made sense begin to shift. This restlessness is a sign that growth is necessary, that something greater is ahead. Moses experienced this kind of restlessness while living in Pharaoh's palace. He had wealth, status, and power, yet something inside him would not let him settle. He saw the suffering of his people, and though he did not fully understand his purpose yet, he knew he was not meant to live in the comfort of Egypt forever. This stirring was not random. It was God pushing him toward his destiny. Many people fight this feeling, trying to force themselves to be content where they are. They convince themselves that they should be grateful for what they have, yet deep inside they know there is more. This is not a sign of ungratefulness. It is a divine signal that a shift is coming. A butterfly, before emerging from its cocoon, experiences a stage where it must struggle to break free. If it stays inside too long, it will never develop the strength to fly. The same is true for a person who ignores God's prompting to move forward. If they resist the restlessness, they may find themselves stuck in a place that was never meant to be permanent. This stirring often comes with a loss of passion for things that once excited them. A career that once felt rewarding now feels empty. The conversations they used to enjoy no longer bring fulfillment. Even the activities they once found meaningful begin to feel routine. This is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of transformation. God is closing one chapter to prepare for the next. Abraham felt this when God called him to leave his homeland. He had security, familiarity, and everything he needed. Yet God told him, "Go to a land that I will show you." No details, no roadmap, just a call to move. This is how God often works. He does not always reveal the full plan, but He stirs the heart so deeply that staying where one is becomes impossible. This kind of restlessness can also lead to frustration. A person may feel trapped between where they are and where they know they are supposed to be. Doors may not open immediately and answers may not come right away. This is where faith is tested. Will they trust the process, or will they settle for comfort over calling? Many people never step into their blessings because they ignore the signs. They let fear of the unknown keep them in places they have outgrown. But when God is preparing someone for something greater, the discomfort will only intensify until they respond. The longer they resist, the more they will feel the weight of being in the wrong place. The restlessness is not meant to bring confusion. It is meant to bring clarity. It forces a person to ask deeper questions. What am I truly called to do? What is holding me back? What steps must I take to move forward? These questions lead to revelation, and revelation leads to action. Growth always requires leaving something behind, whether it is a mindset, a habit, or an environment. Something must be released to make room for what is next. The restlessness is not punishment. It is preparation. It is God's way of saying, get ready. Something greater is coming. When God is preparing someone for a major blessing, their hunger for Him deepens. This is not just a casual interest. It is an unshakable desire to know Him more, to hear His voice more clearly, and to align with His purpose in a way they never have before. This desire often begins subtly. A person may find themselves craving more time in prayer, feeling drawn to Scripture in a way they never were before. Worship feels different. It is no longer just a routine, but a personal encounter. Even conversations shift, with a greater focus on things that nourish the soul rather than drain it. David was a man after God's own heart, not because he was perfect, but because his desire for God was unshakable. Before he became king, he spent years in the wilderness developing his relationship with God. His Psalms reveal the depth of his hunger. As a deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. Psalm 42:1. This level of desire is a sign that God is preparing a person for something greater. Many people experience this hunger in seasons of transition. They may not even fully understand why, but they feel an urgency to press into God more than before. This is because spiritual growth is necessary to sustain the blessings that are coming. God will not release something into a person's hands if their character is not ready to handle it. Jesus often withdrew to pray before major moments in his ministry. Before choosing his disciples, he spent an entire night in prayer. Before going to the cross, he prayed intensely in the Garden of Gethsemane. These moments were not optional, they were essential. Seeking God in deeper ways is preparation for the next level. This desire for growth often leads to separation. Some relationships will no longer feel aligned. Certain conversations will no longer be engaging. Activities that once seemed harmless may begin to feel like distractions. This is because God is fine-tuning the person's spirit, making them more sensitive to his voice and his leading. One clear sign of this season is an increased awareness of personal weaknesses. A person may begin to notice areas in their life that need refining: pride, impatience, doubt, or lack of discipline. This is not condemnation, it is conviction. God reveals these things so they can be addressed before stepping into greater responsibility. This hunger for growth is often accompanied by new opportunities for learning. Books, teachings, mentors, and divine revelations begin to appear, equipping the person with wisdom they did not even know they needed. This is because every new level requires new knowledge. God will not place someone in a position of influence without first equipping them for it. Many people pray for elevation but neglect preparation. They want the blessing without the process. But when God is truly preparing someone, he will place an undeniable desire within them to seek him more than ever before. This is not just for their benefit, it is for the impact they will have on others. Spiritual growth is not just about personal development, it is about alignment. God's blessings are not random, they are connected to purpose. The deeper the roots, the stronger the foundation. The more a person grows in their relationship with God, the more they are positioned to carry what he wants to release into their life. This season often requires sacrifice. Time spent on distractions must be redirected to time with God. Priorities must shift. Convenience must be replaced with commitment. But those who press in will find that the hunger is not a burden, it is a gift. It is an invitation to step into something far greater than they imagined. When God is preparing someone, he does not just bless them materially, he transforms them spiritually. The desire to grow is proof that he is leading them into something greater. Those who embrace this process will not only experience blessings, but will be equipped to handle them with wisdom, strength, and purpose.